And I'm going to be talking about the coming war with Amalek. I believe the spring of this next year through the spring of 2025, we're prophetically going to see the Isaiah 17 war take place and the Psalm 83 war take place. I only have today and next Shabbat, and then I'm done with the replacement theology teaching. I'm going to be teaching today how replacement theology has affected the Feast of Tabernacles. And then next week is going to be one of your favorite. I'm going to teach about replacement theology, where the Shabbat was changed to Sunday. And so a lot of you will be able to have some real good biblical proof of why the Shabbat is on the Shabbat. Okay, so right now, as we have here, replacement theology has turned Yeshua from this into this. I guess right. And then Christians wonder, well, why don't the Jews recognize him? I mean, first off, he's got a bad case of arthritis, as you can see. Now, I don't know how many of you were here when I talked about this, but of course the early Catholics like this kind of a painting. That's what it comes from. But anyway, that little hand thing that he has there, the Catholics wanted to incorporate all of paganism so everyone would feel like a Catholic, which means universal. But that hand signal there, or the hand sign, comes from both the Hare Krishnas and the Buddhists. There's like 1 billion people from Hare Krishna and about 500 million Buddhists. Well, that came the Hindus from 2000 BC that started, and with the Buddhists around 500 BC that was used. And so we see here that this is supposed to be Jesus, and there's no J's in Hebrew. There's no J's in Greek. There's not even a J in English until the 1600s. But this is what replacement theology has done. Well, what else has it done? It's turned the birthday of Messiah, which is on the Feast of Tabernacles in October, into Christmas. Okay, and so we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about the birth of the Messiah, King Messiah. So let's start here in the little town of Bethlehem. Well, how many of you have heard of Bethlehem? How many of you know the Hebrew word for Bethlehem? Beit Lechem. And what does Beit Lechem mean? House of bread. Beit is house. We know from the letter Beit. Lechem is bread. Imagine that. The bread of life was born in the house of bread. What a coincidence. But we're going to talk about the birth of King Messiah, and the way we actually can figure it out. I was raised a Catholic, which is why I can be hard on Catholics. I was Catholic for about 19 years. Studied to be a priest. But, oh, yeah. Yeah. I'd never heard that. Yeah. Well, as a matter of fact, I went to an all-male high school. I left home at 13 years old, and I lived at the school. It was like a dorm, that type of school. And so I was there for 4 years. I was about 200 miles from home, so I never could go home except during the summer. And as a 13-year-old, all of a sudden leaving home, it's kind of traumatic for at least the first couple weeks, and then yay! But yeah, it was a high school prep seminary to study to be a priest, as what I did. And then after I graduated from high school, I said, forget this, I want to get married. So I went to a Catholic college for a year, and then I really felt like, no, the Lord wants me in the ministry, so I was very familiar with monasteries and monks back then too. So I thought I wanted to be a Trappist monk and go to Gethsemane, Kentucky. Can you imagine me never talking? I'd have failed bad. But so what was fascinating, they said, okay, you're going to a year at college. I want you to go at least 2 years, go one more year, and then we'd love to have you here in Gethsemane. I said, great. Well, that summer I got saved. And so the Lord called me into a ministry, but it wasn't into the priesthood. But I don't know if I've ever told you this one story I had, when, why I felt God called me into the priesthood. You guys got a second? It's amazing. I have a little PowerPoint I made to go over this, but I'll just tell you. I grew up in a small town of 800 people. How many of you know, in a town of 800 people, everybody knows? Everybody. Not only that, these were good Catholic families. Some of them had 18 kids. Okay? The reason they had 18 kids, they were farms. They want free labor. It's always about the money. Okay? Now, we couldn't be a farmer because my dad was crippled. He became a tax accountant for the farmers. But in this small town, everybody, especially if you're in high school, you know, grade school, you know all the kids in the whole neighborhood. Everybody knows everybody. And I had 5 older sisters, 2 older brothers, and a younger brother. So 9 kids in the family. And can you imagine this? My mom and dad were 30 years old and already had 9 kids under the age of 13. It's a good Catholic family. Can you imagine being 30 years old and having 9 kids under the age of 13? Could mom get a job? No, she had a full-time job. Okay, my younger brother, who's a year younger than me, was a newborn, and I was like 18 months. I mean, she had like 3 kids in diapers at the same time half the time. It was just insane. But anyway, my dad is in the old VW van back in 57. You know, those VW vans with no front, you know. And they didn't have seat belts then. And he's going about 60 miles an hour at night, about 10 o'clock at night, because they didn't really have speed limits back then either. And a drunk had a vehicle in the lane, but he wasn't there. He ran out of gas and just left his truck on the highway. So my dad in his VW van at 10 at night going 60, 70 miles an hour plows right into the back of this truck. And you're in a van, you're just standing up and there's nothing in front of you but a piece of metal. There is no engine. And so he plows into the back of that, and his right leg, which is stomping on the brake, okay, his femur was completely shattered and gone. His hip was completely shattered and gone. And his head kind of went through the roof, his foot through the floorboard, and he was in a full body cast for 3 years. Medicine isn't like it is today. But can you imagine 30 years old in a full body cast for 3 years, and mom, who has a husband in a full body cast, has 9 kids to take care of too. No income. The guy had no insurance. Dad can't work. Mom can't work. Us kids can't work. We're all under 13 years of old. We had absolutely no income. Talk about poor. We used to joke, yeah, look up in the dictionary the word poor to say, see the Bills family. But because after my dad got out of the hospital, no one wanted to hire a cripple back then. And he would try everything. He tried real estate, but in our small Catholic German town, he sold a house to a black person, and they said, no way, and they booted him out. And then he sold it to a Jewish person, and they said, no way, and they booted him out. And so my dad says, good grief, what can I do? You know, so he's trying to find a job, and he ended up being a tax accountant. But because mom and dad couldn't work, and because I'm only a year and a half, I don't know anything different. But the way we survived for about 4 years is people would just simply bring boxes of stuff to our house. That's how we lived. When my sister was in 5th grade, she had to wear boys' dress shoes because that's all that was in the box. So we lived out of boxes for several years, but I thought everybody had boxes delivered to their house. I don't know any different. But my dad, who's lost his femur, had to have a metal rod attached to his hip side. And so he had to decide if that metal rod was going to be fused straight down and he could never sit, or straight out and he could never stand. And so he decided he wanted to stand, so they fused it straight down, and his knee can't bend either. So he's got this locked leg completely, and it was 2 inches shorter than his other leg. And so he had to pay for a built-up shoe all the time. Well, when they got better, science, they could put an artificial hip in, and he could at least swing his leg then, so it wasn't rigid. And when they were doing that, he asked them if they could lengthen that bad leg to get rid of the built-up shoe. The doctor said, no, but we can cut your good leg off and shorten it 2 inches. He goes, let's do that. So they go in, they slice open his thigh, they cut out 2 inches of bone. They put the bones together with metal brackets and nuts and bolts to hold together and sew them back up. A couple months later, he falls and breaks it. They got to reopen it again, reset everything, sew them back up. And then a year later, they reopen them again and take all the brackets and the nuts and the bolts out and put them back together. So at least now he can swing his hip and also not have the built-up shoe. So anyway, so he was just a lot of pain his whole life, Well, we basically, and both my parents are in heaven, whatever, they're gone. But I was felt, because we never could get much attention, and because I'm the second youngest, I really felt like nobody loved me and I was going to go eat worms, So I'm in 8th grade. And of course, I'm going to run away, and I write this note and stick it on my bed where they can find it. Nobody loves me. I'm running away. And so I go run away. About 4 blocks from us is a big wooded area with a creek. And the train tracks go by it, and a highway goes by it. And it's about 10 o'clock at night. My mom was gone to some retreat for the weekend. Just my dad was home with my brother, who's a year younger, in 7th grade, and my sister, who's 2 years older, in high school. Everyone else is already grown and gone. So we're the only 3 of the house, and my dad. And so I run away, but I leave the note. So, of course, my sister and other brother calling for me. 10 o'clock at night, they're trying to find me. And I have my backpack and my sleeping bag, and I'm laying out by the train tracks thinking I was going to be like those old hobos. And I've never heard that term. But I was going to jump on the next train as it went by and get the heck out of here. So there, you always know if you're going to run away, you're going to go to the creek. And so I hear my brother and my sister's voice, and they're calling for me to tell us where you are. And I'm laying down with my head on a pillow, and all of a sudden I hear audibly, like the police have these big megaphones. It was like that loud. And it was my dad's voice saying, Mark, tell the kids where you are. And I start just crying out to God, God, what am I supposed to do? Am I supposed to run away? Am I supposed to go home? And I hear my brother and sister calling, and I'm crying out to God, and I hear this loud booming voice again, which sounded like my dad saying, Mark, tell the kids where you are. So finally I tell them where I am, and they come running over. And I asked them if they had heard that voice, and was I in trouble with Dad? Did he get the police, and I'm going to have to get put in juvie hall or something, But my dad's crippled. And they said, no, Dad's at home. He hasn't gone anywhere. We're the only 2 that are looking for you. And I go, well, did you hear that loud voice? No, we didn't hear a thing. And then out of nowhere comes a young man out of the wooded area right up to us. None of us had ever seen him before. None of us knew who he was. And none of us ever saw him again. And he said, can I be of any help? And my sister said, well, my little brother's run away, but he's decided he's going to come home. And this live gentleman we all saw said, good, home is where he belongs. And he took off at 10 o'clock at night in the woods. And so, I really felt like God was calling me to be in the ministry because of that. But I thought it was to be a priest, you know. And so that's why I joined the priesthood. But anyway, I've had a couple of things like that happen where I've literally seen things, heard things. Now, I can't say definitely what these things were, but that's what keeps me motivated and going. Okay, but back to this. In Luke 1 through 5, it says there was in the days of Herod, the king of Judea, what kind of a priest? A certain priest. His name was Zechariah, and he was of the priestly division of Abijah, which means of, father, Yah, God. My father is God. That's his name. He had a wife of the daughters of Aaron, and her name was Elisheva, or Elizabeth. Well, guess what? Aaron also married a woman named Elizabeth, in case you didn't know, way back in the day. But when it says the priestly division of Abijah, what does that tell us? Well, if you know your Bible, if you go to 1 Chronicles chapter 24 and you look at verse 7 through 18, it lists the division of the 24 courses of priests and who was in charge of each course. And what do we find? The 8th course was given to Abijah, and the 9th course happened to go to Yeshua, which I thought was kind of interesting. But the 8th course is the course of Abijah. So can we, that's what it just says right there. So can we determine when this was happening? Look at Luke 1, 8 and 9. It happened while he executed the priest's office before God in the order of his division, according to the custom of the priest's office. His lot was to enter into the temple of the Lord and burn incense. Okay, he executed the priest's office before God in the order of his division or course, according to the custom of the priest's office, and he got the lot to enter into the temple of the Lord and burn incense. And look what 1 Chronicles 24 says. These are the divisions of the sons of Aaron, Nadab, Abihu, Eleazar, Ithamar. Nadab and Abihu died before the father, had no children. Therefore, Eleazar and Ithamar executed the priest's office. And we see in 1 Chronicles 24:10, the 7th went to Hakkoz, and the 8th went to who? Abijah. And in 24:19, these were the orderings of them in their service to come into the house of the Lord, according to their manner under Aaron their father, as the Lord God of Israel had commanded him. Okay, so everything was done unto the course. From 1,500 years earlier was Moses, 1,000 years earlier was David. David is the one who ordered these courses, and they have been kept for 1,000 years at the time of Yeshua. Now, the interesting thing, what most Christians aren't aware of, where it says his lot was to enter the temple of the Lord and burn incense, that refers to a lottery. A lottery. There were hundreds of thousands of priests, and the incense was burned 3 times a day. Okay, well, the morning and the evening, let's say twice a day, morning and evening, they had to burn the incense. Well, you take twice a day times 365, you have roughly 700, but there's like 100,000 priests. They all want to be the one to burn the incense. And when you did get to burn the incense, you only got to do it once in your entire life. You were taken out of the lottery. Because, it would take, 100 years with all the priests to be able to burn the incense. So here he is, and he's been wanting to burn incense. He's been playing the lottery of the burning of the incense. But see, they also had a lottery every day. Who was going to take the sacrifices up to the altar? Who won the lottery to be the one to do the sacrifice? Who won the lottery to be the one to take the ashes out? Every function of the priesthood was all done by a lottery. And so every day, because it's like being on a basketball team and sitting on the bench your whole life. Okay, so it's like they want to be in the game. So they were all praying that they could win the lottery, especially the incense, because then you got to go right up to the Holy of Holies. I mean, that was the number one thing. And here he probably feels like God didn't love him because he's old, he's ready to retire, and he hasn't done it. And many of us sometimes feel like, man, our time has expired. But no, God is waiting for the perfect time just for you to answer your prayer. He's all about timing. And so how the courses went, when is the beginning of the religious cycle? Nisan 1. So to make this simple, Nisan is roughly our April. So look at on your notes at Deuteronomy 16:16. It says, 3 times a year, all your males shall appear before the Lord your God at the place he will choose, at the feast of unleavened bread, that's Passover, at the feast of weeks, that's Pentecost or Shavuot, and at the feast of booths or tabernacles. So everyone has to be there 3 times a year. Even if you were Jew in another country or whatever, that's why in Acts there were Jews from all these nations, because they all had to be there for Shavuot. Okay, so what they would do, there's 24 courses. What's 24 times 2? 48. And then you have 3 weeks for Passover, Pentecost, and Tabernacles, where all 24 courses would minister at one time. The reason why is, for example, Josephus says in Jerusalem there were 2 million people there for Passover. So they would need all hands on deck, and all the priests would minister. So here we have the first course is going to be the first week of Nisan. The second course is going to be the second week. But guess what? Passover is the next week, so the people that served the second week also had to serve the third week because it's all hands on deck. And it's the same thing with the third course. The third course also had to serve during that week as well as the third course. So some of them have to serve twice, 2 weeks in a row, based on if it's around a holiday. But typically they would serve a week, and then 6 months later they'd serve a week. Okay, that's how they would do their courses. So now, what comes after the third course? It's not hard. The fourth course, the fifth course, the sixth course, the seventh course. That takes you through the month of May. All right. And this is the counting of the Omer is what is going on, because from Passover to Shavuot or Pentecost, they have the counting of the Omer. So after the seventh course, what course comes? Good. The eighth course, but what happens if you're serving the eighth course? Now comes Shavuot, Pentecost, and everybody has to serve the eighth course. And then comes the ninth course. Is everyone following me? Okay, so here, Zechariah is serving his course, and then the angel of the Lord appears to him and says, you're going to have a kid. And he says, well, I got to get home then. But he can't go home for another week. He's got to serve the whole week of Shavuot. And then he goes home. So here he is, serves the eighth course, and he serves that whole week. All right, and then everyone is there for Shavuot. It is a crowd. So here, can you imagine, again, 1 million people there, all right? And so every single course is serving. Well, let's look at this now. Let's go back to our notes. Look at Luke 1:10 and 11. And the whole multitude of the people were praying without at the time of incense, and there appeared to him an angel of the Lord standing on the right side of the altar of incense, because he's doing the incense. I think the Greek word for multitude here is plethora. What does that mean? A lot. Why? Because it was Shavuot. When you understand the Hebraic mindset and you haven't replaced it with Christianity, you know the courses, you know he's serving Shavuot. He had to. Doesn't it make sense for the Lord to come down on Shavuot, which is what he did back in the Exodus? He came down on Shavuot. And now, look at Deuteronomy 16:16 again. 3 times everyone has to appear. That's why the place is packed at unleavened bread. It's packed at the Feast of Weeks, and it's packed at the Feast of Booths. And then it says in Luke 1:23 through 24, it happened when the days of his service were fulfilled, he departed to his house, and after these days, not months or years, but days, Elisheva, his wife, conceived, and she hid herself how many months? Okay, so here we are, and he has to serve the second course, and then what do we see happens? He goes home with Elisheva and says, let's have a kid. Now, so Yochanan is conceived here, or John. I say Yochanan because that's his real name. And anybody know what Yochanan means? Okay, let me help you. What is Canaan? Grace, mercy. Yochanan is God's mercy, God's grace. But when you say John, you don't get that. That's why you want to keep the Hebrew, so then you know it means God's grace and mercy. Okay, so then this would be the 9th course, the 10th course, the 11th course. Now, she hid herself for 5 months, right? So if that was the middle of June, July, August, September, October, that's to the middle of November. She hid herself, okay? And now she's kind of showing and can't really hide anything. So then what happens, look at this next verse in Luke 1:26. In the 6th month, the angel Gabriel was sent from God to a city of Galilee named Nazareth. Okay, well, let's look here. If the 5th month is November, when is the 6th month? December. And here we have Hanukkah, the festival of lights. This is when Noah's rainbow first appeared. Also, and this Messiah was conceived at Hanukkah. Because what do we see here? It says in Luke 1:35 and 36, the angel answers Miriam and says, the Holy Spirit will come on you. The power of the Most High will overshadow you. Therefore, also the Holy One who is born from you will be called the Son of God. Behold, Elisheva, your relative, has also conceived a son in her old age. And this is what month? With her who was called barren. We have another miraculous birth, just like we did earlier. Okay? With Isaac, with Samuel. Here we're hearing about another miraculous birth. And this is the 6th month, which means it's in the middle of December that Messiah is conceived. Look at Luke 1:56. Miriam stayed with her about 3 months and then returned to her house. Why did she stay 3 months? What's 6 months plus 3 months? How long does it take to have a baby? So she stays until John is born, and he's born at Passover. And a lot of the Jews today believe Elijah comes at Passover. And John was a type of Elijah. Remember? And he appeared at Passover. That's when he was born. Okay. Now, if it's the 6th month for Yochanan in December, and late December is when Miriam conceives. Okay, here you have that cup of Elijah when he is born. But if you are in the end of December and you add 9 months, what does that take you to? The end of September, which is when Sukkot is. Do you see how easy it is to determine Messiah was not born in the middle of winter on the December 25th. He was born on Sukkot. Now, there are Messianic leaders and other people that think he was born on Passover. You're going to see that is the stupidest thing I've ever heard. And I will prove to you why. No reflection on the teachers, but it's just so dumb. Okay, let's look. Let's look at what we got here. Okay. It says in Luke 2:6 and 7. And so it was that while they were there, the days were accomplished that she should be delivered, and she brought forth her firstborn son and wrapped him in swaddling clothes, laid him in a manger because there was no room for them in the inn. What happens on Sukkot? You got 2 million people there from all over, which is why there's no hotel rooms available. There would be all kinds of room if it was in the middle of winter. How many of you go to Alaska for vacation in the middle of winter? How many of you go to Hawaii in the middle of winter? Okay. And you go to Alaska in the middle of summer. It is stupid to think he's born in December and the inn the inn's full. No one goes there. Okay? So the very fact that there is no room in the inn proves you it was on one of the holidays. Passover, Pentecost, or Tabernacles. But we already know from the 24 courses, it had to be, okay, on Sukkot that he was born. Now, I don't know if you know about the swaddling clothes, Basically, the manger was a sukkah. All of the Jews have to be in a sukkah for the Feast of Tabernacles. Okay, that's what has to happen. As a matter of fact, look at this. In Jerusalem, look at all these sukkahs in a truck. They're all moving these sukkahs. Either they're living out of the sukkah in the truck or they're selling them somewhere. They even have sukkahs on camels that you can be in. Okay? Everybody is in a sukkah. That's what a booth, something like that. Now, about the swaddling clothes. If you remember the linen garments of the priests, they all wore white linen garments, and they would never wash their clothes. And when their garments were so stained by the sacrifices, the blood all over it, then they would take those priestly garments that were stained with the blood of the animals for our sins, they would literally cut them into strips, and they would be used for wicks for the big temple candles. Okay, that would become the wick. But they would also take, they were like giant baskets in the women's court, and the women would take those strips home and use them to wrap their babies in. So the swaddling clothes that Jesus was wrapped in was the priestly garments that had been stained with their sins, the blood. That was the swaddling clothes. Here he's a priest wrapped in priestly garments stained from the blood of the sacrifices. Now, but wait, there's more.